Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, owner of Fearless Financial Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning and welcome to Fearless Females. Thank you out there to all of those loyal listeners, and a hi to all of the new ones. Big shout out to our sponsor, Fearless Financial Advisors. I'm grateful that they pay for this podcast. So today we're talking with Lori Frasier, and my favorite part of our conversation came at the very end, or almost near the very end, when she said, "It's not your intent that matters, it's your impact." And it really struck me that, you know, a lot of times I work with a lot of different people who always intend to save. They intend to save when they're 20. They intend to save when they're 30. They're going to save someday when they get a raise or a bonus or something like that. But somehow it turns out that they never quite actually do it. And so it just struck me as such a symbiotic thing that it just isn't your intent. You may have an intent to do one thing or to be a certain way or just show up in your career a certain way, but it's actually what you do, your impact, that matters. So I thought of this along the lines of, like, I always am thinking in my brain, oh, that person did such a great job of doing whatever it was she was doing. She gave us such a great presentation, or he did such a good job at explaining that concept, or I really appreciated the way he phrased in this article. And yet my impact is that I never sit down and write out the note or the email or do a quick telephone call and just tell them, hey, your action really impacted me. What you did made a difference in my life. And so if it stays in my brain, if it's just my intention and it's not actually something that comes out as an impact, as an action, then it isn't really who I am. And I've had to sit with that and think about it for a while since this podcast. And I want you to kind of think about that too, because I think that we could all learn a lesson about not just intending to do something, but actually doing it. Let's get started. I hope you find as much value in Lori's interview as I did. Let's listen. So today we've got Lori Frasier, and she is the founder and CEO of BrightPath Workforce Strategies. I'm so excited to get to chat with you, Lori, and get your experience and all of your knowledge crammed into my head. So I'm so excited that you've decided to join us today. Thank you so much.
Oh, Lori, I so appreciate the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
So my first question is actually, it's my favorite question. And they said, oh, give them an easy question first. This is never easy for me. What is your favorite book?
Oh, gosh. So business book wise, it is probably still the old classic Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I still go back to it a lot. I have a little cheat card in my desk sometimes that I look at just to remind me of some of the key points there. Oh, and then I think my favorite book of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, I like that one too, huh?
Yeah.
It's just such a simple little story, but it brings in so many different ideas of things that they were really dealing with, that were really cutting edge back then in a way that even a kid could understand, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it does come across as a simple story. And I know that the first time I read it, I was reading it just as a story. The more I reread it as an adult, I recognize how profound it truly is, and the lessons that are really deep for all of us to learn and relearn throughout our lives.
Mm-hmm. And it has applications for, I think, too, all levels of where you're at, too. I love that story. I love that suggestion. So thanks for giving that. Tell me a little bit about your journey, Lori. Talk to me about how you got started. Did you always know what you wanted to be? Where are you at now, and what are you doing? Just kind of take me through that process.
I didn't always know what I wanted to be, but I found out pretty early in my work career. I was not ready for college after high school, and I wound up getting a clerical job at a big company, American Express, the Colorado office. So we were a small company within a big company. And it was actually through that experience that I really found that I loved the vibe of corporate. I loved the interconnections and the complexity of it. And so was able to go to college while working and got my MBA as well, and knew pretty early on in my college career that I wanted to pursue human resources. I very much admired what we would call a chief people officer today. Yes, then she was like the SVP of human resources. But I really loved the partnership between her and our CEO. And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And we were pretty progressive at American Express back then in terms of leadership development, employee development, and, focusing on culture. And so I just really had a draw to it. And so focused my undergrad education on human resources. And I did double major in finance because my dad gave me some business advice that I still consider some of the best advice of my life, when he said, okay, you can do the personnel thing, because that's what they called it. His generation called it. He said, but you need to also you need to major in either finance or accounting, because finance is the language of business. And I'm so glad that he told me to do that. I'm also glad that I started out in business on the operations side and on the risk management side, and really saw the business from the business side before ever getting into HR, which I did after I actually got my undergrad. So by then I'd been in the business 6 or 7 years. Fast forward, I had a great HR career and left there after a couple of merger acquisition, left there when it was Western Union in the early 2000s, then worked for KeyBank and had a couple of great roles at KeyBank, first as the head of people, and then moved into a strategy role for the last 10 years. So post the great financial crisis, we had to completely transform our business. The risk environment changed, the oversight environment changed, the relationship between our division and corporate changed. And we had to change our go-to-market. We had to change the way we interfaced with our clients to make sure that we were, making the right decisions, that we were being profitable in everything we did. And so that was just a great journey, really being back on the business side of the business, but still, recognizing, and I think it was that job running the strategy process and what we called performance management, which was really the metrics and the data around the strategy. It was in that role that it really came home to me that a business's business strategy and their people strategy are inextricably linked. One does not exist without the other. We don't call it that. We don't necessarily say that out loud, but there's no way to do a good strategy without thinking about the talent all through the whole process. So that was really exciting. And then, after leaving Key after a great 16 years there, have had a chance in the last several years to work in manufacturing during COVID, by the way. So that was an adventure. And then on the technology side, mostly in the Microsoft ecosystem.
That sounds fascinating. And I think it's so interesting that you said that you found corporate and that you just love the corporate atmosphere, because that's something I don't hear a whole lot. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and stuff like that, and they're always like trying to get out of corporate as fast as they can. But I love that you loved that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So I think what I loved about it was, again, the interconnectedness that I was able to see. Connectedness is my number one strength and strengths finder. So even as a, kind of a very early career person, I was able to see how the things I was doing in my department impacted things in other departments. I was able to start to learn even how decisions that the executives made sometimes were so disconnected from the reality of what was going on at the line level. So I guess what I mean by that is I felt like I could have influence in it. I felt like I could make a difference in it. I recognized, and I say this a lot when I'm talking about the generations in the workplace. I'm an early Gen Xer. We understood that we had to assimilate. If we wanted to be successful, we had to learn those rules and assimilate. And I didn't like all the rules then. And when you talk to me about what I'm doing now, I'll talk about the fact that I still don't like some of those rules. The difference is at the place I am in my career today, I just didn't want to play by those rules anymore. So that's why I eventually left. But I did enjoy it. I loved the constant change that was going on. I loved the fact that there was always like 10 things going on at once. That kind of thing just really jazzes me up.
Hey, Lorie, if you could look back on your journey and you think of like the best investment that you made in yourself, other than apparently going into finance, which I personally think is a great investment, but say if that wasn't it, what would be the thing that you could look at and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that. I just wouldn't be where I'm at today without that.
So can I pick two?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just so blessed to grow up at a company like American Express, which then became First Data Corp and then became Western Union all while I was there. And they were investing in leadership development for high potentials pretty young. I had my first executive coach when I was probably 30 years old, and he was a PhD level. And, they did this big assessment on me. Like I look back at that and the self-awareness that experience gave me at an age that I think a lot of people are still trying to figure it out. And they're still very focused on how other people view them versus being self-aware and having a sense of what makes you tick and how you impact others maybe. That was definitely one. And I've been very blessed throughout my career that I've had companies invest in coaches for me. And of course, right now, having gone through the coaching certification and being a coach myself, I still maintain a coach for myself that I invest in because I found it to be so valuable. I think the other big piece was that I was able to participate in an executive women's, what we were called a mentor circle. And these were women outside of my company. So I think I was in this circle with about 10 women, probably in my mid to late 30s at this point. And it was just such a great opportunity because it's a safe place. You can't talk to a lot of people when you're an executive woman within your company. A lot of times you're the only, right? And so it was just such a great experience to have that place of not just a safe place, but a place of wisdom and a place where we were willing to kind of challenge each other. And that was the first experience I had like that. I will say that I've continued to invest in myself in that way. I'm currently part of professional development group, which is made up of executive level women from across a variety of types of industries, not for profit, self-employed, corporate, so that maintains, that's probably something that I think is still one of the biggest development opportunities that I get. And thankfully I'm still getting. We meet once a month and those conversations leave me moved every time. I learn something deep every time.
I think that's so interesting, Lorie, because I saw an article just recently about how lonely it is at the top for C-suite executive women still today. Like the article came out last week and I was shocked because it does. You do feel that as kind of an upper level management. I can see how you would feel like there's no one else going through what I'm going through. There are a lot of other people going through it, but all of them don't look like you, don't act like you, so finding that group of women that is not only supportive, but actually useful and helpful in the things that you specifically are dealing with.
Yeah, it has been it's been a commitment I've made again for the last 20 plus years in my career, is to have that kind of a safe group. And so it is.
Where do you find it? Because typically you are the only woman in the room, or maybe one of two, and kind of not at that level. So where did you find your group?
Yeah. So originally it was actually through Colorado Thought Leaders Forum, the one that I'm in now. It
Mhm.
was, and then now that group is called Civico, and they have these professional development groups called PGGs, professional development groups. And that's how I found this group. Since then, we've actually kind of forged off on our own to keep it going. But I know that Civico for Coloradans, Civico still offers these professional development groups. I think, some more opportunities that have become available because of the virtual opportunities that we have now is I've heard good things about Chief
Mhm.
for executive women. And it does have I think for some people, a pretty pricey investment. However, it's like anything else, you are going to get out of it what you put into it. And I have heard people talk about the investment point and then say, well, I don't have time to go to this or I don't have time to go to that. And I'm like, well, we make time for what is really important to us, right?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I tell people this. I just had a networking meeting with a young professional last week. And I said to this person, when I left my first corporation, I'd been there 16 years. I was 30 years old, let's say, early 30s. And I left there and realized that my entire network was either at that company still or used to be at that company. Because what we tend to do is we get very insular, and our businesses like pull us to be insular, right?
Mhm.
Pull us to be internally focused. So I made a commitment to myself then, even as a mom with young kids. I said, I will never be in this situation again. I will never sacrifice my network for my company. And so, yes, that meant that I got babysitters. That meant that my husband had to step up maybe more than some others. It meant that I had to feel guilty, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm not spending all this time. But that network today is still paying off in huge ways on a daily basis. So I think you have to work at it. So with any of these things, Chief or Civico or, whatever you can find, you're not going to get anything out of it if you won't sacrifice.
Yeah, I love that. I
It's a
really think that
sacrifice.
it's so valuable too. It's such valuable information. And I hear where you're coming at from the networking aspect. Like, I spent a lot of years just doing the things and getting really, really good at it. But I was in this little teeny tiny place where no one knew me. No one knew I was doing great things. And that idea of networking and getting out there and kind of growing, besides the fact that it sort of fills your bucket, it also really, really lends to your life and your experience. I just don't think you can have as full of an experience if you don't have people around you that help you to grow and be better and show you examples of what what you could be.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
What about some bad advice, Lori? Did you ever get some really bad advice and did you take it? Did you not take it?
The worst advice, I think, and this stands out for me because I remember hearing it and just sitting with it and then deciding not to take it. But it was, and I know you've probably heard this because this was a very common thing starting in the 80s and in the 90s. Senior leaders were telling managers and people leaders, never get too close to your team because you might have to fire them someday.
Mhm.
And the profound wrongness of that, it just is astonishing to me that so many people believe that. And unfortunately, even in the last 5 years, I've worked with people that I can tell still believe that. And it's just completely opposite of what we actually know about effective leadership. It's completely opposite about what we know about getting the most productivity out of your team. Because unless your team, as individuals and collectively, feel a true sense of well being, a true sense of being cared about, a true sense of connectedness, you will never get what you really could get out of that team from a performance standpoint.
Mhm.
And to do that, you have to be vulnerable. I mean, this was, that advice was years before the Brene Brown revolution, right? That sort of then validated for us that being vulnerable and having real relationships was actually okay. But in the 80s and 90s, that was the greed is good era. And it wasn't about building relationships.
I think that's really, really insightful too, to kind of look at that, because I have heard that advice a lot of times and I didn't believe it either and developed those relationships. They say you won't do anything for a company, but you do everything for a person. So you know, I still have really strong relationships from people that we've forged those growth and friendships during, you know, times of working together to get something done. So how did you know that was bad advice? How did you not pay attention to it when you're so young?
Yeah, I think the reason that I knew it was bad advice is that this goes to what you just said, Lori. I knew my relationship with my first boss at American Express. I would have done anything for her. She kept taking chances on me. You know, she hired me and I had to type up these cards on a typewriter. I was the worst typist. And so I would have to redo them again and again because they were 3-ply. Remember the old like Xerox,
Uh-huh.
you know, they had the little black thing in between them.
Yeah.
But she just had faith in me and I had so much trust for her. I would have walked through walls for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I heard this, I was like, okay, I can understand why, like, conceptually you might think that's true, but my lived experience tells me that is not true.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then to be able to pass that down to those that you are training and mentoring and teaching now puts so much more out into the universe of good, high quality managers that kind of help grow their teams from this place of, I always like to say I'm kind of a professional mom by profession. I want to grow my little chicks and help them do well and go out into this world, and that tends to build these relationships and just the goodness out in the world. It just grows and grows into this almost movement sort of thing, Lori. I love that for you. And I love that for the rest of us too, who get to work around those people that you kind of grow and train and love into existence.
Agree. One of the things that I say a lot, Lori, is that when I got my first HR job in 1992. And again, I was working with a pretty progressive company from an HR standpoint, American Express. So we were talking about leadership theories, I guess. And hey, if we do this, we believe that we're going to get better performance. And, you know, it made sense. But to be honest, I don't think that a lot of leaders really bought into it because it was still in theory, right? These things were anecdotally researched and put forth, right? And now, 30 years later, we have the data that proves actually these are the right things to do to get the most productivity, the best performance out of your teams. And, you know, I think the biggest opportunity for us in today's corporate life, like you said, you know, a lot of people are like not so much liking this. I think a lot of it is because so many people just modeled what they learned from the people above them, not what they were being taught in the leadership development classes, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, companies spend billions on these leadership development, but then when people come back to work and they don't change anything, what you actually learn is what you see. It's what you do. It's not what you read. It's not what you hear in a presentation. And so I think we still have a long way to go. The good news is now we have some data. I think that for those leaders who are a little bit more quantitative or analytical in their approach and want to know why they would change a behavior, change a habit, we now have some of that information in black and white in a way that we didn't 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that thought too. Like, there is chances in bigger companies to go to leadership training and leadership development and stuff like that. But a lot of times you're just promoted because you're doing a good job at what you do. And they don't tell you how to lead. They don't tell you how to manage. They just put you in there and they're like, well, she was good at what she did before, so she'll certainly be good at this now. And you're like,
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think it's so important that there are people like you that can go ahead and train us on how to lead and how to grow a team and how to be a manager in a way that feels good to your team and to the world as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. I mean, my whole career, my sort of my purpose, if you will, was I want to make work for everyone, right? Like, how do we make a workplace that works for everyone? And what I mean by that is not the building you go to or anything like that. It's the culture. Like, how do we make work cultures work? And I think we are at a very critical time right now just in the world, right? I mean, there is change coming at us at a pace and a volume that we've never seen before. It's not going to stop. We have a whole new covenant that I think was built during COVID between workers in the workplace around, hey, I'm a whole person, you need to think of me as a whole person and my well-being needs to matter. And at the same time that is changing, we have AI coming on board. We have these generations that are coming in with completely different expectations. And we now have, sadly, a couple decades of, to your point, not a lot of leadership training. And so a lot of leaders just, again, by default, you learn from the way the person you report to leads. And well, again, in theory, I think people understand that there are some really good leadership theories out there. Until the habits are changed in your leadership team, starting with your executive leadership team, until those habits change, you're not really going to see culture change. And I think workers are expecting a lot more of businesses, and I think we're seeing a higher level of turnover with younger workers. And everybody's like, why? And it's like, well, it's pretty obvious to me why, right? And again, now we have the data, and but we need to think about making investments differently as organizations, and not just with our dollars but the time for people to get some good leadership development, but even more so that self-awareness and that ability, that desire for senior leaders to change the way they do things day to day.
Yeah.
That's what's really going to change the workforce. That's good, or the world of work, which is something that I think we all recognize needs to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I really love how you put that there. So I'm not going to add anything to it because I think it's just beautiful. I think the way you said that was just perfect. What about looking back on your career and your journey? Is there anything that you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and do that again? Like, and knowing what I know now, I would do it totally differently. Just to kind of, it's not so much regrets or anything like that, but more along the lines of like that constant improvement, that continual change. Is there a situation you can think of that you wish you could do again?
There is. Because I also was somebody who was raised in a command and control, culture. That was the world I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So even I can fall into those same traps, right? And so I had worked for two companies for most of my career, and you've kind of proved yourself, right? And so you're not trying to, I don't know. I guess when I left my second company that I'd been with for many, many years, I feel like I went into these more recent roles still trying to prove something, even though I know the Brene Brown stuff and I know the vulnerability stuff. I think I could have gone in more vulnerable to start with, more intentionally curious to start with, versus versus really kind of thinking, oh, well, I've seen it done this way, and maybe that would work here. But really just being more curious and being more open and vulnerable about knowing what I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find that so important and insightful. And as I look to things that I want to do in the future, I'm always like, oh, I would go in. I was, Monday morning quarterback everything, if that's what you call it. But I would go in and I would step back and I would watch what they were doing and I would make, suggestions or maybe ask a lot of questions. But it's so interesting that you say that, yeah, like you knew all the things that you should have, would have, could have maybe made it a little easier transition. And you still did the things that were like, oh, I've seen this before. I know what you should do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's been, but I think what that proves, because I'm 58 years old. We never stop learning. And as long as we're able to look at ourselves, we never will stop and we'll never stop adding value, right? I think when I see leaders start to kind of level out in terms of the value they're really adding to their teams, it's when they kind of are at that point of they think they know everything. They don't know what they don't know anymore. Even though the world is changing, like that's what amazes me is when I talk to leaders today who are like, oh, kind of act like they have it all figured out. And I'm like, just the fact that you're acting that way tells me that you don't have it all figured out. It's almost like the ones that are more open and saying, wow, things really are changing. What does that mean for us? Those are the leaders that I think will be, leading the companies that have the real productivity and high performance that we'd all be seeking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that idea. And I just finished a leadership course, at Leadership Douglas County. And that's something that I found too, is like, as leaders, it so pays to be curious. I love working and being around people that are curious, that just want to know. They want to know everything in your head. Could you just give me all your information? Because I am so interested in what you're doing. It makes for a rich and rewarding life, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any philosopher that you read will talk about the fact that, that is the key. The key to keeping your brain agile is to recognize that there's so much that we don't know and to be curious and to be genuinely curious about how other people do things and just how other people see things. Perspective is huge.
What about if you could go back and talk to yourself at when you were typing up those, triplicate note cards in 2021, just right at the beginning of your career? Is there some specific advice you'd give to you or something you'd tell yourself?
Clearly, I'm still learning this, but listen more, right? Listen more. Even though I'm extroverted, I'm high ideas, again, see connections. So I love to blurt things out. It's my personality. I wish I would have kept my mouth closed more and actually listened and waited, especially once I got into leadership roles. Here's something I wish I would have done differently. Once I got into leadership roles, especially, I wish I would have waited to be the last person in the room to speak, not the first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I would have heard a lot more ideas had I done that.
Yeah, that I agree with that. As I was running these leadership meetings for my team, I noticed that if I would just shut up, close my mouth, and kind of listen to what they had to say, a lot of times it also helps you be a little bit more creative yourself, because after you've heard their ideas, then what you were thinking in the first place changes, and it allows those younger, newer people to speak, to get their ideas out there. I love that. That's a really smart idea. I'm going to do that, Lori. I'm going to put it down on my list. I'm going to put it down on my vision board. What scared you the most when you started? Was there anything? Maybe you weren't scared.
I absolutely, what scared me the most. This is still, it's so funny, but I still, like everybody, I still have some of that imposter syndrome, right? And I'm the youngest of 5 in my family. And then I was very often, for a long time, the youngest leader at a senior table. And somehow, even though that is certainly not the case anymore, I still feel that sometimes, like how did I get here? Like, it's interesting how some of those things never go away. So I think, when I was younger, I was worried that people wondered if what does she have to say? Kind of that kind of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah. And it's so interesting though that still hasn't gone away, because like you're ruining my imagination here, Lorie, because I genuinely thought that, like, as accomplished as you are and as good as you are at all these things, that you wouldn't wonder whether you were good anymore, that there was some point you just got to where you were like, okay, I can do this. I know I'm good at this.
Again, if I think intellectually about it, I know that, but maybe that keeps me humble. Maybe that keeps me curious too, right?
Yeah.
So, if I did think that I, was the smartest person in the room, I wouldn't be asking questions. I wouldn't be wanting to keep my mouth shut, right? So maybe that's the silver lining to it, is that it has a little humility to it.
So imposter syndrome is your superpower.
Yeah.
I like that.
It could be. And I guess, the other thing I have realized more and more as I've gotten older, and especially once I started to coach and do executive coaching, everybody has some fear. Most of us don't walk through life thinking, I got it all figured out. And I think there are some people that have enough swagger to make you think that's true. But once you really get to know those people, you find that everybody has those vulnerabilities. Everybody wonders if they know enough,
Mm-hmm.
and if they are smart enough, and yeah, the right person to be leading where they're leading. It's interesting how much I've learned that over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. And if we can look to and speak to those vulnerabilities, both for those probably underneath us and those, above us, that puts a little bit more kindness out there into this world and lifts us all, right? Just a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying earlier, this loneliness epidemic, it's an epidemic. And I hadn't read the article you were talking about the, women leaders. That doesn't surprise me at all. But oddly, as technology has supposedly made us more connected, I read a lot of stuff that says people feel more isolated than ever. And so, really the way to build connections with people is to be vulnerable and to say, yeah, I get scared. I get scared sometimes.
Yeah, I worry about that too. Yeah, this world is a little crazy. I've got some anxiety about it too, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. The world is very crazy right now.
Any unique challenges because you were a woman, Lorie?
Yes. Yes. And I've never been a victim about it, right? But, I mean, everybody, anybody who grew up in corporate America in the 80s and 90s has a story, right? But that's not even where I think the challenges came. I think that even really well-meaning men in executive leadership don't recognize how much the boys club still exists in a lot of places. I had a conversation with a leader, my boss, who I had a great relationship with. And I said, well, people, the women around here talk a lot about the boys club. And, after kind of an initial, well, that's not the case. That's not that's not true, kind of. And then he sort of went quiet for a minute, and he said, well, I guess the reason I don't see it is that I'm in it. And I was like, bingo. Yes, that's right. That's right. And you know how people get into a club? They get invited by people who are already in the club. And so if you don't even know there is a club, how can you invite people into the club? You know what I mean? But there's a level of denial, I think, because there's, nobody wants to be accused of, being in any way biased or, exclusionary. Mm-hmm. And I don't think most of what we see is purposeful exclusion. I really don't. I think that I naturally gravitate to women. I just told you I have a couple of women's groups. Like I naturally gravitate to people that are a little bit more like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with a couple of groups right now on some events that have historically been women's events. And we're trying to get pretty intentional about saying, actually, we want our allies in the room.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want it to feel exclusionary. There's no way they would show up without us actually inviting them.
I know, because they're as uncomfortable in groups
Yes.
of all women as we are in groups of all men, right?
Exactly. So we need to reach out the hand and invite them and give them a role. Like explain to them why we want them there. And I think more of the boys clubs that still exist in corporate America, it would be great if they had enough awareness to reach out a hand and say, you're invited.
Mm-hmm. That idea of allyship, or,
Yes.
deliberately looking for someone that you might be able to invite in or grow or help just get a little with your network, because men have created these networks for years and years and years. They're really robust. They do great things. Maybe inviting someone into that network that you wouldn't normally think of doing.
Yeah. And even into the, unfortunately, what it looks like to people that are not in the club is it looks like high school or middle school cliques, right? It's like, that this group of people does stuff on the weekends. You hear that, oh, well, they all wound up at the same, they went out after that client event, just them, And so whether you're intentionally trying to do that or not, the message it's sending to the rest of the organization is there's a club and I'm not in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a level of conscious and intentional inclusion that doesn't happen naturally. So if executives really want it to happen, they have to be intentional, because it's not going to be organic. It's not going to be organic. It's going to feel like a stretch sometimes.
Yeah. Feel a little bit awkward, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a stretch. I love the way you put that, but so needed and so necessary on both sides. I think.
On both sides. And, again, I keep mentioning the younger generations. They expect it, right? They're coming in with a true perspective that there is diversity, because that's how they've always lived. And what's happening is they're coming into these organizations and they're seeing this stuff and they're like, wait, if those are the rules, why should I assimilate to those rules? So again, women my age, your age, we had no choice but to assimilate, right? These folks feel they have the choice. And that's what I think we're seeing a big part of why we're seeing people self-select out, or why corporations are sort of rejecting them, because they're expecting a voice, they're expecting inclusion. And when that doesn't happen, they don't necessarily just assimilate. They continue to push.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the thing, Lorie, that you are most proud of?
Well, within my whole life, what I'm most proud of is my family, my children, the family that my husband and I built. That's what I'm most proud of. I would say if you were to ask me that in my career, I think it's knowing that I've really had influence in making businesses better by making cultures better.
Yeah. You can look back and see I've made a difference.
Yeah. I can see that. And thankfully, I have people that reach out to me and tell me that too. Because everybody has their down days. And especially starting my own business, I have a lot of self-doubt and a lot of fear. And when I hear from someone from my past that lets me know I made a difference, lets me know, that just means the world.
I agree completely. I do some mentorship, and I have this one particular woman that I'm mentoring, and about every other time we kind of get together, she's like, just so you know, I took that advice or thought about what you said and did this thing, and it just really you're making a difference in my life. You're changing my life a little bit at a time because of what you're saying or what you're willing to do. That means the world to me. And so just like you're saying, like if somebody has impacted you, it means so much to me that I start looking around for places where people have impacted my life and sending them thank you notes.
And telling them, tell them. That's my best advice for people. If someone has made a difference for you, tell them. Because you probably think they're sitting at that board table feeling like they 100% belong there, like they have the answers. Tell them that you've made a difference to them, because they still need to hear it.
Yeah. Everywhere, every level, every person, every level, I'm convinced.
Absolutely.
So, any advice for a young lady who's just kind of starting down this path that you're already so successful at? Is there anything you would tell her?
Focus on self-awareness. Understand how you and your actions are impacting others. It's not your intent that matters. It's your impact. And I think it takes most people too long to realize that you can have really good intentions, but if the way you're impacting people makes them feel beaten up or left behind, it doesn't matter how good your intentions were. When you say, well, that's not how I meant it, it doesn't help the fact that that's how they felt. So really understand that there's great responsibility in your impact, and your intentions don't matter as much.
Yeah, that's something important, I think, because I always think, well, that isn't the way I intended to do that, or that wasn't what I meant. But
Right.
But you maybe need to do that second step of going back and finding out how they took that, because your intentions don't matter, but what they actually feel or how they actually experience that is what makes a difference in their life. So
absolutely. That's what they'll remember you for.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what your intentions were. Even if you tell them, they're going to remember what the impact was, not what the intentions were.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so important. Thank you so much, Lorie, for spending some time with us and just talking us through your journey and all the different things and the different bits of wisdom that you gave us. If I have a young woman who's listening to this and wants to call and get some advice or just ask some questions, how does she do that?
I think one of the best ways to get a hold of me is just LinkedIn. I am an avid LinkedIn user. I'll give you my email as well. My website is still under construction, or else I would give that to you right now. But, I think LinkedIn and my email is fine. If you want to put those in the show notes, I'd be great if somebody wanted to reach out to me.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lorie. What an honor to be included in your podcast. I really appreciate it. I love the name Fearless Females. Makes me feel good.
We've got some fearless females out there for sure. We all are fearless females. We just got to find our fearlessness sometimes buried a little deeper.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorie.